I'll use this, I think.
Yeah.
So I just have to stand here and not move. I'm Thies. I work as a product owner on RIS and RipeStat. And RipeStat is a tool that was just mentioned by my colleague that we are redoing this year, and that we really want to improve and make more accessible for users and to show the relevant information. So if you have questions about it or you want it to change, do not hesitate to contact us, because we realize that we can do better than we did in the past. So if you do not know this tool, RipeStat is an information service that gives information about IP addresses, autonomous systems, DNS host names, and routing data. And routing data is what I'm going to talk about today. To do this, we gather information from a lot of various sources. So we use the RIPE database for all the registration records. We use routing registries for very similar information. So not for RPKI, but for route records, DNS data, BGP data from RIPE RIS, and some other registration data that's not from the RIPE NCC, but from the other regions. So when was this block of IP addresses given to what given out? To look at the history of how this was distributed, because the idea is to show what happened on the internet. But what I want to focus on today is the routing data from RIS, the routing information system, I think. Oh, that's bad that I don't know. And how you can use that in practice, because they're very complicated. It sounds like a very complicated topic, but we made tools to make this data accessible. And I'll also show you how you can do some more complicated things with this. So RIS is a route collector project, and that means that we run BGP speakers, routing daemons on a lot of route collectors on around the internet. We have 23 route collectors, and these have BGP sessions with BGP pairs. But instead of routing traffic, they have a normal BGP session, like the data that a router shares with all the BGP pairs, and we store it for later processing by researchers that use our raw BGP data files, and by other mechanisms that we use internally for RipeStat and for other tools if somebody uses the data from RIS Live. So I want to show these various ways we use this data, and I'll go from simple and well-known to more useful to hard to do. So let's start off with the looking glass. I think everybody here knows a looking glass, and in RipeStat we have a looking glass which has the data from our 1700 BGP pairs, and it's all aggregated in one interface. We've recently made this a lot more usable, and you can use this directly on the website and in the API. And what I show here is that you have this web interface and all the routes for the K-root prefix. And then we have the ability to filter on the AS path. So in this case, I took the upstream ASN of the K-root site in Kazakhstan. And that way I see that for 5 out of the 470 pairs that have a route towards the K-root prefix, the traffic goes to this K-root point of presence in Kazakhstan. Another very unique data set, because you cannot get this on the internet anywhere else that I'm aware of, and something that network operators really need in real life, is the routing history. Because if somebody asks you to be the upstream for a prefix, you want to know, like, do they own this? And is it likely that this AS wants to announce this prefix? So we index this historic MRT files from the year 2000 on, and we give you a web interface where you can see how this prefix was announced. Were more specifics announced, less specifics, and which AS was this? So if you get a new customer and you have a little bit of doubt whether they own the prefix, especially if it's like a legacy IP space, you can take a look to see if it's plausible what's happening. The next one is one that we recently did a lot of work on to make it more smooth, because it uses a lot of data in the background, is called upstream visibility. And this is a tool in the routing page on RipeStat where you can see what upstreams were there for a network at a certain distance. So if you think about it, if you look from the origin, at the origin, distance 0, you see the origin AS. If there's only one AS announcing this prefix. If you look at distance 1, you see the various upstreams for an AS, and the further away you go, you see how the traffic is spread out over the internet. And What I show in this case is a situation where a network created an AS0 ROA for their prefix, which means that it should no longer be that they say, hey, this prefix should no longer be routed on the internet. And you see here that the visibility drops. So the number of peers that see this prefix drops quite a bit, around 6 in the morning UTC. And this is at distance 1 from the origin, so the upstream of the origin. If we then take a look one step further away, you see that the upstreams that originally were upstream this network, that most of these start filtering the route, and that an upstream that wasn't as prominent before, so an upstream network that was not transmitting a lot of the traffic in the initial situation, becomes one of the few upstreams that's still forwarding the traffic, and that AS 6762 in this case is the AS that does not do ROV filtering, and that's the major AS that makes causes this prefix to still be reachable, even though it's ROV invalid. And I'm sorry for introducing all the API terminology there. It was my work for a while. Then if you want to look at something really complicated, you can look at the BGP messages that RIS receives one by one in BGPlay. This is a tool that is really for the experts. You select the time range and what the prefix and what route collectors you select. And then you get a diagram of all the BGP updates for this prefix. So when the path change, you see this message and you see it in the animation. If there's a re-announcement because the community's changed, you see this. And when there's a withdrawal, the path starts to change. And this is really an expert tool, but it's a very nice animation. And if you learn how to use it, it will really help you get a more visual sense for what's happening. But on the other hand, it's complicated. And the route collector data that we collect from our peers, and I didn't mention it in the beginning, but running the route collector is kind of a cooperation between our the community that provides the data and the RIPE NCC that runs the system. So we do not lock away the data that our peers give to us, but we gather this data and we store these BGP archives and we make these publicly available as open data. And we make the tools to make it easy to access the data. But if you want to, you can use the data yourself using CLI tools like BGP Reader from KEDA or Monocle from BGP Kit. And you can grab this data on the CLI, or you can build a script around it. Or what Anurag Bhatia is now doing is you can put it in the database and then query it. And because so many nice, because I did see so many nice analysis that Anurag was doing, I wrote down a short ClickHouse tutorial, a short tutorial of how to index this data in ClickHouse, which is now on RIPE Labs. If you go to labs.ripe.net, it's the post from yesterday. Yeah. And once you have data in a database, you can work with it as if it's in a database. So we previously had the upstream visibility for the AS0 ROA. In this case, I have all the routes in RIS for KRoute, and I split the AS path into to AS by AS, and I take not the origin but the AS before it, and I just count how many AS numbers do you see. And you can now do, if you index the data this way, it's a complicated process, but you can analyze things much more deeply. You can see what prefixes are announced by multiple ASNs. You can see what networks are multi-homed, etc. So what I wanted to show you was that we capture this BGP data with the routing information system. We have 3 accessible ways to use it in RIPEStat and an advanced tool, BGPlay. But if you want, the data is not that scary, and you can reuse it yourself and use it in a database, do SQL, and use your own SQL skills that will get better over time, as well as an LLM to do these queries and do some quite nice analysis of what's happening for a network or a prefix. And that's what I wanted to show you guys.